On a night when the greatest empire in the world threw a party, the guide showed up uninvited, and he brought a message no human hand had written. Ancient Babylon, the greatest empire the world had ever known. 539 years before Christ. A city that breathed arrogance like air. The walls rose to 100 feet into the sky. The hanging gardens defied every natural law. Rivers of gold flowed through its markets. And at its center sat a king who believed, truly believed, that nothing could touch him. His name was Belshazzar, son of Nebuchadnezzar, heir to the greatest empire the ancient world had ever known. Tonight, he had thrown a party. 1,000 of his closest nobles, rivers of wine, music that shook the stone floors, and outside those massive walls, the armies of Cyrus the Great, quietly, patiently, waiting. But Belshazzar was not thinking about armies tonight. Tonight, he had other plans. In the intoxication of the moment, Belshazzar gave an order: bring the gold and silver vessels. Not just any vessels. These were the sacred cups, the bowls, artifacts taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, carried back to Babylon as war trophies when Nebuchadnezzar conquered the holy city decades before. Objects set apart for the Most High, dedicated to worship, carrying the weight of a covenant between God and his people. Bring them here, Belshazzar said. Tonight, we drink from them. And so they did. 1,000 mats touched what had been consecrated to God. 1,000 voices praised gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And heaven watched. Then silence fell, not gradually, instantly. Because against the white plastered wall, directly opposite the great lampstand, a hand appeared. Not a man, not a shadow, a hand, alone, luminous, moving across the wall, leaving letters burning in its wake. Belshazzar saw it, and the Bible says his face changed. His thoughts terrified him, his knees knocked together, and his legs, the legs of the most powerful man in the room, gave way beneath him. The king of the greatest empire on earth was on his knees, because of a hand that no one else had sent. He screamed for his enchanters, his astrologers, his wise men, the finest minds the Babylonian Empire had trained over generations. He offered everything. Purple robes, a golden chain, third highest position in the entire kingdom. Whoever can read this, whoever can explain what that hand has written, name your price. They came, they studied the letters burning on the wall. They conferred, they searched their ancient texts. And they had nothing, not one man, not one scholar, not one sage in the most sophisticated empire the world had ever produced, could read one message from God. And the king's terror deepened with every empty face that turned toward him. Then a door opened. The Queen Mother entered the banquet hall, a woman old enough to remember what the king had forgotten. She had not been at the feast, she had been thinking. She addressed Belshazzar directly, not in panic, not in flattery. O king, live forever. Do not be alarmed, do not let your face be pale. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Your father honored him above all his wise men. He could interpret dreams and explain riddles and solve difficult problems. His name is Daniel. Summon Daniel. And Daniel came. He walked through the great hall of Babylon, past 1,000 trembling nobles, past overturned golden cups, past the shaking court of the most powerful man alive, and he was the calmest person in the room. Belshazzar offered him everything: the robe, the chain, the position. Daniel raised his hand, and he declined the gifts. Keep your gifts. Give your rewards to another, but I will read the writing, and I will tell you what it means. And before he gave the interpretation, Daniel spoke of God. He reminded the king of his father, of the days when Nebuchadnezzar's heart was lifted up in arrogance, of the moment God removed him from his throne and sent him into the fields, where he ate grass like an ox and was drenched by the dew of heaven, until he acknowledged that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whomever he wills. You knew this, Daniel said. You knew all of it. And yet you have not humbled your heart. Instead, you lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You brought his sacred vessels to this table. You drank from them while praising gods that cannot see or hear or know. But the God who holds your very breath in his hand, the God in whom your entire life depends, him you have not honored. Therefore, this is the writing that was written. And the any God has numbered your kingdom, and he has put an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales, and you have been found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided, and it is given to the Medes and the Persians, 3 words, 4 judgments. And the verdict of heaven delivered through the lips of one faithful old man. Daniel finished, and the hall was stone silent. Belshazzar kept his word. The purple robe was placed on Daniel's shoulders. The proclamation was made, 3rd ruler in the kingdom. But the kingdom had already ended. That very night, the same night, while Belshazzar slept behind walls he believed impenetrable, the Persian army found the way in. They diverted the Euphrates River, the great river that flowed through the heart of the city, and through the now dry riverbed, beneath the base of those eternal walls, they came in silence. Babylon, the city that called itself everlasting, fell before morning, and Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. Exactly as Daniel had said, exactly as God had written. That same night, Darius the Mede received a kingdom, aged 62 years. And so ends the account of one king, one feast, and one night that changed history. But the story does not stay in the past, because every generation inherits the same question Belshazzar refused to answer. Who holds ultimate authority, not just over empires, but over my one life? Belshazzar knew the story of his father. He knew what pride had cost Nebuchadnezzar. He had seen the evidence with his own eyes. But he chose not to be changed by what he knew. Knowledge without humility is one of the most dangerous conditions a human soul can inhabit. Because when the scales are brought out, and they will be brought out, what is weighed is not what we knew, it is how we lived in light of what we knew. The God who wrote on Belshazzar's wall does not write in condemnation alone. He writes because he is a God who communicates, a God who warns before he acts, a God who sent his own Son so that what is found wanting could be made whole through grace. Daniel walked into that throne room that night as the only free man in a building full of powerful people, not because he was fearless by nature, but because decades of faithful walking with God had produced in him a peace that does not depend on circumstances. He knew whose he was. That is the inheritance available to every one of us. Not the gold chain, not the purple robe, not a position in any earthly kingdom. The inheritance of a life lived in humble trust with the God who holds every breath. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, numbered, weighed, divided. Let those words fall on us not as a sentence, but as an invitation. To live differently, to hold loosely what the world clutches tightly. To remember, every single day, who it is that gives us the next breath. Go in peace, live in humility, and may what is found when God weighs your heart be a heart that has learned to trust Him.